Hello, everyone. This is Ben Hanson from Game Informer, and I'm here with
Ben Reeves from Game Informer.
And the two Bens recently went to Tokyo, Japan to visit Yu Suzuki and his studio and learned all about the development of Shenmue III. We wanted to create this video, a little bit of a travelogue, just to try and express how surreal and, I think, interesting this trip was.
Pretty simple office building.
Also very hard to find.
Yeah. Our cab driver did not want to drop us off in the right spot.
The biggest takeaway was the level of reverence a lot of developers had for Yu Suzuki. You know, just seasoned Sega developer. It seems like he still has so much respect. A lot of his former coworkers from the Sega days have joined him on the development of Shenmue III, a lot of the leads. And just that sense of, let's make sure Yu is happy. Let's make sure he has his coffee ready to go. He's staying awake. He's having a fun time. The fun thing about this overall trip was that this was on the 20th anniversary of the Dreamcast launch. So this was September 9th, 2019.
That was kind of cool.
So we asked Yu about, like, does it feel like 20 years? And he said, looking at old photos, I can see the 20 years. One of the more interesting aspects of this trip was just figuring out exactly the structure for the overall story of Shenmue, how he originally wrote 11 chapters, and he's kind of pulling from multiple chapters to create each Shenmue game at this point. So don't think that it's an 11-game arc.
Right. Maybe kind of a George Lucas style, like, I have some ideas of where I want this to go.
Right. Yeah, the most exciting thing was that he brought out some of the old notebooks. He said the oldest notebook with ideas for Shenmue is from 1996, and he brought out notebooks that were labeled The Legend of Akira, back when it was still the Virtua Fighter RPG, technically.
Yeah.
Yeah, we asked why the story was so big originally, and he said, I wanted to model it after a novel. It was just trying to basically create a story that was novel length. I thought that's what you did for a game, but it turns out way overshot it. Said chapter 1 was about 30,000 characters, and he said, in Microsoft Word, that's about 30 pages, just for a frame of reference for what that outline originally looked like. And then we got to see the cutscene scripts. That is what's in the blue notebooks. So that's actually specifics of, this is what the cutscene will look like. These are the lines being said, instead of the overall story arc specifically.
I thought it was cool just how, professional and done those notebooks were. Even though they were so early on, they didn't know what the game was going to be, but they had made, official bound notebooks for the scripts.
Yeah. I was just delighted that Yu Suzuki agreed to do a rapid fire, and my favorite part was he did not even see a reference for what these interviews were like ahead of time. We sent him, the Miyamoto one, the Monster Hunter ones, to be like, hey, here's an example. Did not watch it and was a surprisingly good sport throughout that process.
Other than Shenmue, what's the greatest Dreamcast game of all time?
To
learn more about the game itself and our extended impressions of the visit, definitely check out the Game Informer Show podcast. We talk about it at great length there as well and go into more detail. So the other strange thing, in addition to this being the Dreamcast launch anniversary, is a gigantic typhoon had just hit Japan as we were staying there. So there were trees down. Our visit to the studio was delayed because traffic was a nightmare. Trains were out of commission.
So nobody could get anywhere.
Right, which was an issue because one part of this trip was going to be after we finished recording the rapid fire interview, we were going to travel to Chinatown within Tokyo, and he was going to show us around and how that area helped inspire Shenmue's creation.
And so we're already kind of late getting started. So we were kind of like, hey, we don't really need to do this tour if you don't want to. Is this really that important? So
it seemed like it was important, and so we loaded into Yu Suzuki's daughter's van to drive to Chinatown, which should have been about a 15-minute drive. But because of the typhoon, there was absurd traffic. We were stuck in this van. We were honored to be stuck in this van for 2.5 hours on a bridge. So there was no escape trying to get to Chinatown.
And you might think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but the exact time was 2.5 hours.
And so at a certain point, Yu Suzuki said, hey, you can interview me if you want. And I said, yes, please. And I said, hey, I heard that back in the 90s, you converted all of Sega to work on Apple computers instead of PCs. And that helped Sega's transition to the online world. And he said, yeah, I remember that quote was going around from some other interview that some other Sega executive gave, but I don't remember that. And then the translator just was too busy looking at Google Maps trying to figure out how to get out of the car to continue translating any of the interview.
For 2 hours, he was looking at his phone like, we're going to be stuck in this?
It was also so hot.
Yeah. And so Yu was like, maybe I should look at my phone as well.
So his daughter stuck her phone to the dashboard, and then he started playing a show, and Yu Suzuki then just watched Blacklist on Netflix.
Yeah. Then I was like, do you guys like Blacklist? And Yu Suzuki was like, said something, and the translator was like, yeah, he thinks it's a really well done show.
And then that wasn't the weirdest moment, because then, unprompted, they start playing the first episode of Fuller House.
which may have been because it's like, hey, let's put on something that's funny, like a crowd pleaser.
I don't know. But at a certain point, Yu Suzuki did say the phrase, Full House is the foundation of Shenmue. He was joking.
Oh, he was dead serious.
There's a scene where Uncle Jesse's holding a baby, and it kicks Uncle Joey in the old testicles. Ooh. And that got a laugh out of Yu Suzuki, and he said, "This is global comedy compared to the jokes from your rapid fire interview that you asked. That was very specific. Fuller House is good global comedy." Was what he was trying to explain. Also, we should point out Alex PR from Deep Silver was also in the van. And when we were watching Fuller House, he said, "How Rio'd." I just want to give him credit for that joke.
Yeah.
You guys spend a lot of time down here when you're starting to brainstorm Shenmue?
ブレインストーミング、中国
食べに来たよね、イメージ作るために。スタッフのイメージ作りに。
なるほど。
あとテクチャーの採取。
It's not necessarily brainstorming in a sense, but in order to the team member to understand the atmosphere, I did many cases, to brunch or dinner with them.
It was like pushing hard for us to go to Chinatown, and then we found out like there wasn't really a strong reason for us to be there.
He really likes it. It was the most surreal and almost best possible experience to have with a legendary game designer like Yu Suzuki. It was just so unique. I loved it. I know being in that car was frustrating, but I loved every second of it. Again, for more on Shenmue 3, you can read the big feature in the latest issue of Game Informer or check out the Game Informer Show podcast.
Please do.
Please do.